My name is Carl Quo, and this is Founder Quest, a podcast about the journeys of starting a game studio. Today, we're talking with Stephane Cotichini, founder of 81monkeys. We talk about his path from owning a restaurant in his 20s to working at a fast-scaling game startup and ultimately choosing not to relocate for a AAA role and instead launching his own studio. That path included work-for-hire gigs, financial risk, an unexpected Kickstarter surge, and a brand partnership that came about because fans of his work spoke up inside a much larger company. Stephane speaks candidly about what it means to be a solo founder. He's open about the emotional challenges, the financial roller coaster that he has to deal with alone, and the loneliness that can come from being a creative founder acting as a CEO. This conversation is full of hard-earned insight, vulnerability, and inspiration, especially for anyone navigating the indie founder journey alone as a solo founder. Let's jump in. Where I normally start with these conversations and sort of questions and jumping into it, I always think of it as there was this moment where you're like, yep, I'm going to start a company. I'm going to start a game studio. And it went from like, maybe I'll do this to like, no, I'm like mentally and emotionally committed. This is the thing I'm doing. And I'd love to hear about what led up to that moment and sort of what were the factors that pushed you over the edge. A lot of people say it's not a single moment, it was a series of things, but like what made you think about starting a company, and then what made you commit to starting a company?
Yeah, it's actually a really good question. And the way that you phrased it there, super helpful, because it got me thinking, and it really actually helped me connect with a moment in time, because I founded this company essentially twice. And so I started my entrepreneur journey as a young person. I opened up a bar and grill when I was 24. I then went into the retail side of video games, and then went back to school and studied video games. And then I got a job at a startup game studio that grew really fast, and we had some exciting projects. And then I left there, and I was about to take a job as a game director at another big studio. And they're actually going to move my family to another city, and we were just figuring out all the paperwork. And right before I signed, somebody came up to me and said, I have this game idea. Do you think you could work on it? And I looked at it and I thought to myself, I could work on this, but not only could I work on this, I could hire people and actually start the foundations of a studio. And so that's what I did. But it wasn't my project, right? It was sort of like an opportunity, but I wasn't fully committed. I mean, I was committed to that game being a successful game. And over the course of the development of that, I ended up taking on a work for hire project with the studio, and that turned into a bit of an acqui-hire. And I left. So I stopped my studio and I went and worked at this other guy's company, essentially, which is another startup. I was there for a year. And then I realized that I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to work for someone else. I just felt that I had something to offer the world, and that I was holding that back. It was a really overwhelming feeling. And so I spoke to my family and I said, I'm going to quit. And I just want to work at 81monkeys. I just want to grow that studio. And so that was a really pivotal time. But even then I didn't really know where I was headed necessarily. I came back, started working on a couple projects, and one project was called the Chore app, and one was a multiplayer Sudoku game on mobile. And the Chore app was just like a little side project that I was doing that the team ended up working on. But at some point, I saw another indie game developer, solo developer, who was about to launch a game in a genre that I was really passionate about. And I always wanted to make a game in that genre, but I was really scared of it because it's really ambitious, which is open world role-playing game. And I saw this solo developer doing it, and I thought to myself, like, crap, I could do it. Not only could I do it, I have all the team and the talent to do it. So I talked to the team, and they were like, we would all love to work on this game. So I started working on the weekends, And I started writing and designing on weekends and evenings while we were working on these other projects that other people were paying us to work on. And I would bring it into the studio on Monday. And really, it was that moment where when I saw the enthusiasm of the team combined with just my desire to do this, I went all in. And that really is the start of our journey. We ran a really successful Kickstarter. We ended up with a huge fan base. We have like thousands. I don't know. Our trailer's been viewed over 250,000 times. And the game's not even out. We have over 4,000 people on our Discord. A lot of people are sort of rallying behind us and excited for what we're doing. And yeah, I know I'm doing. This is like the thing is like it occurs to me as I know what I'm doing what I'm meant to do. That's how it occurs to me now. And it took a massive leap of faith. Obviously I saw an opportunity, but this project's cost over 3 million so far. And I didn't have 3 million when I started it. I didn't have any money, very little. And, that's just been part of the journey, but yeah.
I mean, it almost sounds to me like there, as with many startups and founder journeys, there were multiple leaps of faith, right? Like there was the I have this job that is potentially moving me, but like, locked in job sounds like it was with a larger game studio, right? And that has its own set of amazing opportunities. And then you sort of took the leap of faith on no, I'm going to stay here and really start something smaller and work with them. And like, that turned into its own journey. And then this, the secondary leap of faith of like, okay, we have kind of a studio that's in this pattern of work for hire and releasing games, but let's take this bigger swing that suddenly I have, the confidence and the inspiration to go and take the swing and go and do it. I'm curious, as you went on the journey, like, was it just a gut instinct that like, you have this job offer at hand or working through this job offer and this other one comes up? Like what really compelled you in that moment to be like, I would rather start the thing here than take this larger opportunity?
You're talking about the studio that was going to move my family to another city.
Yeah.
So I, at the studio that I was at, the one that I was quitting, leaving, I had actually about a year before had quit as well. And the reason is, so we were working on like an expansive sort of social media role-playing game. It was for Facebook and I loved it. I was in love with it. And then we launched it. It got rave reviews, but there were some technical limitations that prevented the game from scaling. It started crashing when too many players played it, for instance. And the studio decided to cut it. And then we moved on to this other party hosting game that we were targeting women, which actually I ended up really loving working on as well, even though at the time it occurred to me as like, this isn't why I got a job here. But then they canceled that game on the eve of launching. And they said, we're now going to work on social casino games because that's a big hot trend. And I'm like, no way, I'm not. That's definitely not why I'm a game designer. I don't want to work on casino games. And so I did quit. I got a job at a AAA or maybe AA studio in Vancouver and signed the contract, was about to start 2 weeks. And then the investors got together with the CEO and they said, you got to keep him. So he called me back, offered me 20 grand raise. And I said, no, but thank you. And, then he called me back again. He said, we're going to double your salary and we're going to make you lead and we're going to give you shares and all this stuff. So anyways, I stayed and I remember getting on a call with the investors just before I like fully committed. And I told the investors that the only way I can stay is if I actually can make a difference for this project. So I just committed. I said, I'm going to be the part of the reason this game's a big success. And I called the other studio and quit. And the HR person was mad. Literally told me I was burning a bridge.
Yep.
Thankfully, they followed up later and apologized and said, but whatever. I stayed. And that game, that social casino game, became one of the top 10 fastest growing games on Facebook at the time. It was by far my biggest success. It was the highest reviewed social casino game in the world. And that at a time when those games were really hot. So when I say social casino, it's not actually a gambling game. Like it's gambling, but you don't actually make money. So it's gamified role playing progression type game mechanics in it. And I learned something on that project. What I learned was it didn't matter what I work on; it matters what I do. Like that's actually what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about designing and creating and innovating, and that doesn't have to hinge on what the project is, right? So I was doing that on a social casino game, but I fell in love with my work, and I loved doing what I was doing, and I got opportunity to innovate and be creative and create compelling user experiences and work with a great team and see that team grow and see the financial success the studio got as a result of all this work. And then we ported it to mobile. And then I decided, okay, now I am going to leave. And so long story short is the project that came to me that was suggested was a multiplayer Sudoku game. And there weren't any on the market yet, but the thought going through my head, like I didn't become a game designer and make a mobile Sudoku game. Like that's not appealing. But then I was like, hang on a second here, right? Like I just learned this. And so I had a second look and I'm like, no, this is an opportunity bigger than just this game. I get to do what I love doing and I get to pick who I work with and so on and so forth. So, I think that experience of working on that social casino game when I thought I hated casino games. I was like, no way. I never went to the casino. I'm now probably quite an expert on casino games, not just on the probability, but on mini game design and all of that stuff. But yeah, that experience had a huge impact on me. And so the irony of all of that is I'm now working on like my childhood dream game. So, there is definitely a compelling aspect to that, but absolutely that experience of staying there and working on that and connecting with what's really important about my work, not the project. Because I see people in this industry who, especially young people who graduate from college and like they dream of working at a certain studio on a certain type of game and they don't apply anywhere else and they go years without a job. And then they end up just giving up and working somewhere else. And I just think it's such a shame that they, that they have this idea that the type of game they work on is so important to their career when actually it's not. It's just you need to fall in love with the process, I guess is what I'm saying. So
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that sort of pursuit of how to fall in love with any problem in a lot of ways, right? And I do think that there's a high overlap of that ability with being an entrepreneur, because in many ways you're going to be faced with all sorts of problems that you weren't necessarily signing up to solve, and then you have to go and solve them.
Yes.
And in that vein, like, as you've gone on this journey with 81 Monkeys and you sort of framed it as like you founded the company twice, and there was this, original moment of founding it and starting to build out the business. And then there was this almost refounding of it to work on this really exciting game that was much bigger and scarier in many ways than you had previously journeyed on. What were the really big like learning points for you that or the things that you're like, oh no, I have to go and learn this because I've committed to this path, so I'm gonna have to solve this. So now I need to go and learn, X, Y, and Z, right? Like, what were some of the big things for you there that you're like, I'm staring this unknown problem that I've never faced before in my life. What do I need to go and learn how to do it?
So much. There's so much learning. Obviously, I know, I can just imagine. I've listened to enough of your podcast episodes to know, that I'm not alone in this. But it's so I kind of joke that I'm a game director acting as a CEO. Like, because that's really where my skills and talent lie, is in creating compelling user experiences. And so figuring out who I am as a CEO has been a huge challenge. I am the type of person with my sort of ADHD brain where I'll just ignore things. Like I'll ignore tasks if they don't occur as interesting or a huge priority or my life's on the line type thing. I'll just ignore it. So that it created many challenges. Also, this team has grown from just me and one or two other people to now 14 or 15 people. And so, we're a full-fledged company now, and I'm someone who really likes to flow, and I'm okay with not knowing what I need to do tomorrow. I will just deal with today. But with a big team, that doesn't work anymore. So process has been really the thing that I've learned the most about. Not just like I know a lot of process because I worked at other companies and like I owned a restaurant, and structure and process is so important because you're redoing the same stuff every day. You're prepping the same food. You're making sure you have enough of it, and you do that over and over again. And you need to make sure that it's always done in the right way so that you're serving the best, quality of it. But like finding the process that works for me and my team, and this is a creative team. So the thing about video games is you have so many disciplines. You have art and development and design and QA. And then I'm doing all the writing, and a lot of the core designs comes from me. So, figuring out that and how it works for the team so that we can be healthy and productive. And when I say healthy, I mean like, mentally and emotionally healthy. I'm not having this stressed out team. And so, yeah, figuring out that middle ground has been really the thing that I've been so committed to and have learned the most about myself and the team and how to do this together. So
before we started recording, you did mention that you don't actually have co-founders, which is often sort of the next topic that I go into with folks. And so having been on a solo founder journey, I can understand that is not the most comfortable of paths to choose to take. And I'm curious, as you founded 81 Monkeys and as you've been on this journey, was there a particular choice of being a solo founder, or did you sort of stumble into it? And like, how have you dealt with being really a solo founder on this journey? Like, talk a little bit about what that's been like for you.
I did attempt to seek founders, and I talked to people. I tried to sort of inspire people within what I'm doing, but I never seem to get people to that point.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes team members, and like working to sort of inspire team members to take on bigger, more exciting roles within this organization.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of this has been me just pushing forward, without necessarily a concrete plan. Like if I was to stop today and start from scratch, it would look very, very different. I think, my brother's an entrepreneur, very successful entrepreneur, and he always said that co-founders are really important. And that's one of the things he looks for if he's ever advising someone or considering investing in another company. And so I always had that in my head that like it was important, but I actually knew that I work better with others. Like I work better as a collaborator. I've been a leader through most of my career, but I always sought to do that through collaboration. And so being in a position where it's just on me all the time, I think that's been the hardest part of this whole journey. Like if if you were to ask, and maybe this is going to come up, what are the most challenging things? I would say talk about money and the money challenges over the years and how we overcame all of those. But the truth is even those, I think, were made far worse by me not having a co-founder and not being able to share the responsibility that I have with that person. So, yeah, it's been a huge challenge, and it continues to be, but it's less so today. I have a lead developer, someone who really sort of grew into that role, and he's just incredible. I have a lead artist, somebody who did not grow into that role. He's an art director, sorry. And he's been an art director for a really long time and has so much experience. I think more experience than anyone at the studio, to be honest. So I have that level of leadership and experience here. Um, but I think that not having a co-founder and not actually focusing on that early on was a huge mistake on my part. And I suffered as a result of it, but still managed to overcome my challenges in my own way. So,
I mean, I think, in many ways, solo founding isn't impossible. It's just very hard, right? One of the things that I often talk with founders who do have co-founders and are going through that, like one of the things that am most interested in is how that dynamic really thinks about decisions and deals with disagreements. And often, like, especially when you have that co-founder dynamic or a mini co-founder dynamic, right? Like that can become complicated or not. And, I hesitate to say the upside is that the only person you can disagree with yourself about the business and owning the business in a really way is yourself. But, I'm curious. You sort of mentioned, you have team members. The organization is more of a 13 or 14 sized organization, right? And you've sort of come into a moment with the business where it is obviously much broader than just you. And so how have you set up, as a collaborative person, how have you set up that organization to be some of what a co-founder could be, as far as pushing you on decisions, pushing you on disagreements, having, running ideas and strategy. And, as a solo founder, it does, technically it all comes down to you. And as the CEO, it all sort of comes down to you anyway. But like, clearly some of that organization you've probably set up to cope with this lack of additional founders. And so I'm curious how you've set that up to help yourself succeed.
yeah, it's really great, insightful question. And certainly, I have done that. One of there's a few things that I've done, but probably one of the things that has helped me is sharing what I'm dealing with others on the team, specifically the other leads on the team, and being open with them, and then using them as a sounding board, and then also being open and transparent with the team as a whole. That's been really helpful. So, one of the things that I've really prided myself in over the years, because like we started this journey on this project about 4 years ago, and so much has happened over that time. So many challenges, so many financial breakdowns, and me not knowing where I'm, like weeks away from financial ruin, but then just making it work, finding funds from someone or getting a partner or whatever, and not losing anybody. That's what I've been really proud of. So no turnover. And I'm really proud of the team for sticking through it and for believing in not just me, but themselves and each other. And I think that's like, I don't take that for granted. And so, being open with them about what I'm dealing with and letting them share with me a little bit. I can't see, the thing is, it's a bit of a catch-22 because I want to be open. I want to share it. I want to get off my chest or whatever, but I don't want to scare them. And sometimes stuff can occur is pretty scary, but at the same time, I learned early on in my career that we're playing a game together. And if they don't have all the information and understand the rules and expectations of that game, they can't play it with me. So that's sort of the mentality I had. But yeah, relying on my leads. And, I think there's times so this just happened to me, actually. We had a team meeting it was this week. And leading up to the team meeting, I was very stressed. I was very stressed about a number of things happening within the organization. I was very stressed about what I thought the team was dealing with and what they were thinking of. And so I had this, and then there were just some breakdowns around process that weren't working for me that I needed to address. And so I had this team meeting, and the team meeting went really well. It was amazing. And I got out of the meeting and I said to my wife, I'm like, I feel so much better. Like, not just because like we didn't actually conclude everything. We're going to have another follow-up meeting, to like a full team meeting, to talk about everything we sort of learned, and what new processes we can implement to help make our lives easier. Mostly they're around making my life easier as game director and supporting me as game director. But 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 my point is, and what I said to my wife was, just being in the room with everybody made a huge difference for me. Like just seeing their faces and being able to talk to them and actually tell them what's on my mind without blaming them or anything like that, that made a huge difference. And so this idea of like staying connected with them, it's so incredibly important to me. And I have to keep reminding myself of that, because I can easily go months without, just like my head's down and I'm working, and I could go months without really engaging with too many people. And that doesn't work. That doesn't work for me. I'm actually here for them, and more important than my success is their success. And this isn't like something I learned or was coached into. It's something I discovered about myself, that actually is what drives me. And I really am here to support people. And I got love tattooed on my knuckles because I just woke up one day and realized everything that I'm striving for and everything I do is for the love of others. And I like I have to keep reminding myself of that and keep those connections alive.
Yeah, I think it can be very easy, especially in a founder role. And I think triply true in a solo founder role that you yourself are in, for the like urgency of the day-to-day to sweep you up and distract you from sort of the things that you need to keep yourself sane and keep yourself connected and grounded and in a healthy mental space. And that's always a struggle that I think even, obviously even folks with co-founders find themselves in. It's part of the sort of founding journey. And so it's always nice when the universe sort of comes together to remind you, like, hey, you gotta hang out with your team more. You gotta do this more. So that's awesome. I know that you've been on a bit of a journey with the studio as far as how you're funded, a mix of partner projects. It sounds like maybe partner and co-dev projects, as well as a Kickstarter and stuff. But could you give us, a little bit of a high-level view of how 81 Monkeys is funded in whatever detail you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah, so we, originally this has always been a work-for-hire studio. We don't have any equity partners at all. And I've attempted to pitch and get investors on board. And one of the big challenges that I face is that I'm a creative and not a business person. And there was a time when creative approaches and focuses were highly sought after, and people would invest in figuring out whether your creative genius was worth investing in. And now they don't anymore. They're very focused on the data and business strategy. And, so I must have pitched like, honestly, 60 or more times to publishers and potential investors. And I got somewhere with the publishers. We got some verbal offers, but they were really horrible terms. And so I just realized a long time ago that we're on our own, and I'm gonna have to figure this out. And so what I'll do is I'll share like what our funding structure has been and where those funds have come in. And then I'll share a couple examples of how challenging it has been. So we did have a Kickstarter. It was a very successful one, considering who we were at the time. We were an unknown studio with a kind of a first project being brought to market. Sure, we have tons of experience and together as a team, but we also have tons separately as individuals. And that Kickstarter brought in about $400,000, and we got a huge community, very supportive, amazing, wonderful community as a result of that. But that wasn't enough money. In fact, leading into that Kickstarter, well, actually, I'll come back to that. After Kickstarter, I raised some funds through a funding model that my lawyer and I helped come up with. My my lawyer is David Joel. And essentially, it's a project funding partnership program where we take money in and there's a couple profit share pools and we pay back the debt, and we also pay back 3x on top of that. And it's a very healthy model for a studio, far healthier than what's being offered by publishers out there. And so we raised about $750,000 on that project. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share kind of what happened that had these things, and then a really big moment as well. So we were on a work for hire while we were preparing for our Kickstarter. So we had been working on World of Antera for a year and a half, maybe, before the Kickstarter, and we got a lot of traction on that project while doing this work for hire. And then we had our Kickstarter date scheduled, and about a month before the Kickstarter, our work for hire client couldn't pay us. So they owed us about 6 figures. That money was going to be used not just to pay the team, but to pay for marketing for our Kickstarter. And they couldn't pay us. They wouldn't pay us. And they couldn't pay us, but they did end up paying us. But the point is when the Kickstarter started, I didn't have money to pay the team, nor did I have any money for marketing. And that Kickstarter went for about 5 days and made very little money after it started. And I was actually considering canceling it. I was really close. And I went to bed one night, and the next morning I woke up and I got a message saying, somebody wrote an article about your game. And I went and checked the Kickstarter, and we got like tripled our revenue that day. And then the next day we got like 60 grand in one day or something like that. And then everything just blew up. And then there's like a dozen articles written, and we changed, like everything transformed overnight. So that Kickstarter finished. And then we ended up, we had barely any money because I had to pay back the team. Like I had to pay a bunch of debt and stuff like that and get the team all paid up and deal with all the stuff that, came with that. And then right on the sort of like, I was pitching to publishers and trying to get raise money. And right when we were about to run out of money again, somebody in my network said, hey, I heard about your studio. I'd like to talk about it. And so chatted with him, and he ended up becoming our first partner in the funding model that my lawyer helped come up with. And, he brought on as much as he was willing or able to invest in the project. He believed in us a lot, and he took a leap of faith, but he believed in the creativity of what we're doing. So it wasn't about the business strategy for him. He actually saw some potential in what we were doing. And then that still wasn't enough money. So like I knew, I'm like, geez, this is going to be about 6 months, and we're going to then what are we going to do? So we just kept working and tried to get the project further along. Cause again, we're going to go through the pitching round again, but every time I do pitches, they're better. I'm better at it. The game's more advanced, so we can show more of it. And then those pitches were going okay. We had kind of some general offers from publishers, but again, the terms were so horrible. They want like the terms are like, from some of these publishers are, you launch the game, they take 100% of the revenue until they get all their money back. Then they take 80% of the revenue until they get like 3x. And then they take 50 or 40% of the revenue forever. And I was just like, man, we put so much effort into this. Like, it doesn't make sense. So we were like, had a couple, maybe we had like, I don't know, 3 or 4 months runway. And I got this email out of the blue to an email address I rarely ever check, asking in a very few sentences, would you be open to working on a video game for a brand? And I thought, no, hell no. Like we need to focus on this game. Like we got to get this game to a point where we can share it with publishers and land whatever. But I decided to call or schedule a call with this person. I got on a call, and before the call, I said to myself, I'm going to get on this call and I'm just going to sell this guy, like whatever it is, I'm going to be the best I can be for this person, because who knows what this opportunity is. Well, it turned out it was a massive opportunity with a very big brand that we're all very familiar with. And I got off the call and told the team about it. And the team said, yeah, we can do this. It's in our wheelhouse. It actually aligns up with our project quite well and brings in a lot of money. So we signed the deal. And that project's just wrapping up right now, and it's a couple months from launching. And, so here's what they said to me when I got on the call. They said, the reason we emailed you is because people on our team are fans of your game. And they pushed us they said, hey, reach out to the studio. Like, you never know, maybe they'll work with us. And that project. So we were talking about during the team meeting, we're so proud of that work. We're so proud of that project. We can't wait to share it with the team. We've managed to actually, I can't speak too much on it because I got to be careful about the NDA, but
Of course.
very exciting project, and it's coming out soon, hopefully in a few months. And it's been, when the world learns about, when you learn about what that project is, I think you'll see how huge of an opportunity it was for us. And I think what we're going to be able to do with that experience and the exposure from that project is going to fuel the work that we're doing on our game. And our game is 9 months away. So we're working really hard to get that final push done now. So, but fundraising has been quite the challenge.
For sure. We've already sort of talked about it in a lot of ways. I often ask, what's the biggest difference between how you thought it would go and what actually happened? And it feels like just night and day difference between many of the stories we hear about fundraising and how things can go. I'm curious, for you personally, right? Like, there's a lot of parts of that journey that are hard, right? Like, taking on the debt, not knowing whether or not you can pay the team, having to go through that. Like, there are a lot of very hard parts, obviously, in that. But for you personally, in your own sort of like motivations and how you're wired, what was the hardest part of that journey, and sort of how did you navigate it sort of emotionally and mentally as you were going through it?
Sometimes I don't know. Like, I don't know how I get up in the morning and my biggest fear is letting people down. It's not public speaking. It's not dying. It's letting people down. I don't know where I learned that exactly. It was sort of like young Stephan. Something happened in my life where that became this big deal. Having to come to work and tell the team, I don't know how I'm going to pay you, is really difficult. And I will suffer for days and nights over that. And having a huge community of people who are like cheering you on for this game that you're making is also challenging, because I don't want to let them down.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the byproducts of having a big community is you also get trolls. And this is something that I don't often talk about, but in this context, I think it's relevant, is like, there are people who literally say, your game's a scam. It's never coming out. You've been lying. And they're just, I don't hold a grudge against any of them personally. We don't know what they're dealing with in their lives. And like, when you get a big enough community, it's a reflection of humanity. And some people are just not able to communicate effectively or manage their emotions or whatever else. So, but, I get called names, and it's hard, because if I'm at a low point and I'm worried about how I'm going to get through the next week, and then I read stuff like that, it's pretty challenging. So I think that how I've managed to get through this is having, and this is like not a strategy necessarily, this is just the way my life is. I have family who support me, and my wife. So like, we've sacrificed tremendously. I got an early inheritance at one point, and most of that, or if not all of that, went back into my company. I sold my car and haven't replaced it yet. So I sold it just so that I could take my family on a vacation. And my wife and I talked about it. And there's just been a lot of that sort of challenges. And life's not horrible. Like, we live in a nice house, and we make things work. But the point of it that I'm trying to make is, my wife's never said, maybe you should think of doing something else. She never once said that. My mother, my father, my brother, my siblings, they've never questioned what I'm doing. And I hear from other people that like that's not the experience that everyone has with family and close people. Like, they get pressure. That's usually, I think, where most of the pressure and doubt comes from, right? Is like, my wife should wake up. She's like, I'm sick of not knowing whether we can pay rent next month. Like, I'm sick of this. Can you please do something about it? She's never said that. I know she's sick of it, but she's never said that to me. So, and it's not just those people, right? It's also the team. The team don't give me a hard time. They know we've had hard times together. And they're excited by the work that they're doing, and they keep focused on that. And they've never given me a hard time. So having that people around me who believe in me and who aren't actually questioning me has been a huge foundation for me. And even when I'm riddled with doubt and can't get out of bed or whatever, or like I drive to work and can't get out of my car, for instance, like that, I've had those experiences, those moments in time, is, that it's not being reflected back to me by those around me. And that's been really, really important.
That segues nicely into sort of a big thing that I like to talk through on the podcast. It is sort of that idea of like, what are the support structures around a founder that help them deal with, the trials and tribulations of this journey, right? It's a very rough life in many ways. Both the founder and the CEO role can be very isolating in a lot of ways, because it's a very unique role that, like, even if there are a bunch of other people at the company, they don't really understand what it means to, have the runway of the company ticking away in the back of your brain and always on your mind. And it sounds like, you definitely have a lot of close support within your family. It sounds like you've built a team that has a lot of sort of collaborative support. What other things have you sort of introduced into your life or found to surround yourself with that provide that support along the way of your journey?
Sorry, can you rephrase that? What other things?
Yeah. So like, what are the support structures that you've introduced into your life to do that? And like, you've already sort of mentioned family and stuff. And so I'm sort of wondering what beyond necessarily, having a really supportive family that has really helped you navigate the ups and downs of this journey.
So I think there's a number of things that have been really important. One is I have gone to see therapists, and I've had some really wonderful experiences going through that. I'm not currently seeing anyone, but it's been huge confidence booster for me to be able to go and talk to somebody and share what I'm doing and the challenges that I'm facing. And the other thing is, so along with that sort of therapy conversation, is I have gone through some personal development and professional development type stuff. And that's been really, really effective for me. I sort of realized that I needed to be coachable, right? So if somebody's giving me advice, I need to actually be open to hearing it and applying it. And that mentality has had a big impact on me, where I actually can take that and apply it to try it out. And maybe it doesn't work, or maybe it does, but like, I'm not just dismissing it because it sounds awkward, or that's not who I am, or whatever. And I think that's really, really important. This idea of being coachable. I think it's like the mentality is that I can get advice from anyone. It doesn't matter what their experience is. If I'm open to it, people can give me value. And so, that's important to me, but also starting to align my life. So at some point over the last few years, I was like, what is the future going to look like? And how can I start to operate like that now? So I started going to the gym a lot, and really, in a year and a bit, like, transformed my physique. And that's become a really important part of my sort of routine. And I know that has had a tremendous impact on my mental health. And the other thing is I play pool competitively, so like billiards, and I play a couple times a week. and I play in tournaments usually once a month or so. And I actually travel. So I've been to Vegas, I don't know, 3 or 4 times playing in national championships and stuff like that. I played with a partner down there in what's called Scotch doubles, and we came third at the national championship for the gold division. And that has been, you know, has been a huge help for me getting that competitive side out. But not just that, like figuring out what it takes to be good in that sport. It requires a lot of discipline and mental discipline. When you bend down at the table to make a shot, there's so much going on. There's so much physics to it, and you have to keep all of that stuff in your head and apply it in a moment's time. And so it's been a bit of a teacher for me, because I was struggling at it. I wasn't doing very well for like a year. There's an app that rates that rates you globally among all players. And I could see my rating go. It's like a chart that goes up and down, like a heartbeat, but I wasn't going up. Like I was going up and then down. I'm like, what is, either I quit or I get better. Like I'm not okay with just being like this. So I asked myself what was going on, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm not practicing enough, for instance. And I shifted how I related to pool, and I shifted how I started practicing. And then my chart graph for my skill level just started to spike, and my confidence in playing went way up. And I like take these other lessons I'm learning from life, and I apply them to who I am at work. And that's been hugely helpful as well. So it's kind of like in line with me saying being coachable. Sometimes lessons are there to be learned that in places you don't expect them to, but if you're open to it and listening, it really can have a big impact on you. And it's not just being open and then some random bit of advice comes to you. It's knowing what your challenges are, knowing what you're dealing with, and staying open to finding solutions to them, because those solutions are all around us.
Yeah, I think that's very, very sage advice. And I have always found that, you pick up all these lessons from things that you think aren't necessarily going to be relevant to your life as a CEO. You're like, getting good at pool isn't going to apply to my life as a CEO, but it always, you always find those through lines of better understanding how you yourself operate in many ways. And that applies to so many things that we do in life. We've talked a little bit about this, but because you have both the sort of impending release of the partner project, and then the sort of not that long in the future beyond that, the release of the game that you guys have been working on for 4 years. But in the perspective as you as a CEO and you as a founder, what do you sort of see on the horizon for yourself and the company that is really it probably, the keeping you up at night is not exactly the right phrase, but that you're thinking a lot about and that idea of who am I going to need to be in 2 months and 3 months and 6 months and a year, and how am I starting to build myself up to be that human? What are you thinking about there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have always been ambitious. I think it's important to make bold statements about what your goals are. Because if you don't have big goals, you're just limiting yourself and what you can achieve. And maybe you don't fully achieve those goals, but at least you work towards something and you ended up where you are as a result. So, I think in the game industry, well, in any business, actually, for that matter, all you have are goals to some point. And those goals aren't credibility. I can say, so one of my goals has always been to be a leader in the indie video game space, to be someone that brings value to this industry and that other people look to for that. And that's a goal, and it's not who we are today. We lack that credibility to fill that. And so launching a successful game that's well received by the world, and is certainly creates an opportunity for that to come to life. So it keeps me up at night because I so desperately want it. Like
Mm-hmm.
I, I've always felt like I have something to give to the world, and I didn't know how to get that out of me. And it really was hard to live with. It was hard to live in my own skin because I wasn't doing that. Like I wasn't being that in the world. I wasn't being somebody. I mean, maybe that's not necessarily true. In like small ways, I was. But I think I have lots of accomplishments that I'm really proud of and things that I've been involved in. But I always felt like I wasn't living up to my potential, I guess. It doesn't really occur as potential. It's not. It does occur as like I'm not making a difference. That's really how it does occur. I'm not making a difference for the people I care about, and it. So I'm starting to feel that way now,
Mm-hmm.
and I think like keeping that in my mind and keeping that present as the goal, and getting my butt out of bed in the morning with that in mind is really important. Um, and as I sit here with you now, I really do feel like I'm on the doorstep of that future, and we're on the eve of the studio as being that leader in the industry. And I can't wait to see what's on the other side.
Me too. Like I'm really excited about your stuff coming out. Like I'm excited to see it as it gets revealed and see that impact being had. I like to close out the main section of the interview with an entirely unfair question, which is, given your experience so far with 81 Monkeys, would you ever found another company? Right. Like, and this is sort of like, who knows what happens? Like, let's not, this isn't a like, oh, if you fail tomorrow, would you start another one? Or, this could be, hey, in 5 years, you sell or have an acquisition or something amazing that 81 Monkeys, it is highly successful. But in the future, you've gone on this journey as a solo founder, which is really going on this journey in hard mode. Would you found another company? Would you go on this whole thing again?
Yeah, absolutely. Only because of all the tremendous learning that I've gotten. And it's not just that I've managed to learn, it's that I've managed to apply what I've learned in real time and see the benefits of that. And I would go into another venture with the confidence of all that experience and wisdom. If I was to rewind time and be in the exact same position, it's a tough one. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. Like if I was to tell the me, or someone exactly like me that and knew they were going to face everything that I faced to get to this point, I'm not 100% sure. Like I sacrificed a career, and I shouldn't say I sacrificed it. I went a different path, and
Mm-hmm.
it's been a tough journey, but so yeah, I probably would even in that situation, but it would be a tough one. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
if I was to, so let's say World of Terror launches, and let's say somebody does approach and wants to purchase the studio, and I make the decision to sell, I probably will have to stick around because I'm the game director, and they would want that value to continue to grow. So, but at some point I would leave, and the moment I leave, I will found another studio immediately. So, yeah.
Awesome. So what I normally do to close out the interview and sort of wrap things up is what I call the introspection lightning round. It's really a set of questions that were developed for me when I was going out and trying to find a co-founder. And it was really a set of questions that I would ask even before our first meeting, and we would both sort of show up to our first meeting with the answers and go over them. And so I'll ask them to you now. Starting with, what is your superpower?
I think I mean my initial thought was just grit, just because I think there's been a theme through through this conversation of grit and sticking to itness. But I actually think that it's empathy. And the reason is because this idea that I do what I do because I care about other people, it transcends just my relationships. It actually derives the work as a game designer. I think that a really successful game designer has empathy, so much so that they really can put themselves in other people's shoes. And I know this isn't traditionally what empathy is, but like I put myself in the shoes of a player or somebody experiencing some bit of content, and I can see the friction that they come into, and I can see the enjoyment and where it comes from. And that has been something that has made me really successful as a game designer, the ability to feel connected like that, as if I was seeing it through somebody else's eyes. And so as a studio founder and somebody who's leading a team, I think that's also really important. I'm not perfect. I make tons of mistakes. If you were to talk to the team, I'm sure they would have things to say that annoy the crap out of them that I do or don't do, or times where I didn't speak nice to them or wasn't understanding of what they were dealing with. But I always can go there. Like I always can get myself back to the point of understanding and caring and compassion. And I just think that is definitely one of my superpowers.
Outside of that superpower, what are your biggest strengths? Grit, clearly one of them.
Yeah, I think, well, I think following through on things, not giving up, but I think it's kind of all covered with grit. My ability to communicate, whether it's in writing or verbally, is also really important. My ability to share ideas in a compelling way that gets other people excited, hugely important. I don't think that the team, if I wasn't able to do that with them, I don't think they'd be here still. So I think that's really important strength, but also self-awareness. It's something that I continue to develop in myself and rely on.
What is your big weakness?
That's a tough one. I remember getting interviewed for that big studio job, that AAA, and they asked me these questions, and I couldn't answer it. I didn't prepare for that. And it was awkward because they asked what your biggest weakness, and I went silent. And I went silent for so long that somebody laughed in the room. I think there was two people interviewing me, and one of them laughed, and then the other one just said, "Oh, you know what? Let's move on." It was very awkward. But no, I'm clear. I have weaknesses. I think I'm overly sensitive, and I think what I do is I allow others to dictate how I feel about things or myself, or I allow that sensitivity to dictate what I view as possible, if that makes sense. And often it's not actually, it's my story of what I think they think of me. And then it somehow manifests very weirdly in how I behave and act. There, for a large part of my life, I had this experience where I become a different person around certain people. If I'm like intimidated by them or something like that, or look up to them, and then I get this for some reason because I'm awkward around them. I'm like, oh, now they don't like me, or they don't believe in me, or they don't think I'm capable. I start to kind of embody that a little bit in how I relate to them and communicate with them. And then the other thing I think is, I mentioned just that I have been diagnosed with ADHD as a young person. And often that has me doing things just enough, and then moving on, or holding off on things and not getting them done when I should. And that creates stress and anxiety for me and those around me. Thankfully, I'm very excited to work on a video game, and the inner kid in me that's where my creativity comes from. So there's no shortage of supply and work ethic there. But, in terms of running a business and being a CEO, it's a huge challenge. Now, thankfully, my wife came on board back in February. She was working in nonprofit at a really great nonprofit in Vancouver, helping at-risk youth. And she was there for, I think, about 4 years. So she left there. and she came. She's now our studio director, and she's slowly taking all of the operation stuff off my plate. And it's already had such a huge impact on my ability to provide value to the project and the team. So, I think, I knew I needed somebody to take that off. I was willing to hire a CEO. Like when I said I was looking for co-founders, I'm like, you can run my studio for me. You'll be the CEO. But yeah, I think those are my biggest weaknesses for sure.
What behaviors do you have that come out as sort of stress reactions? So like when you're under real stress, like how does your behaviors really change?
Well, I ruminate a lot. I definitely get a lot in my head, and that impacts my health. It impacts my ability to sleep, and it just really sucks. And I mentioned that, like, being overly sensitive about what I think others think of me. That's also, so I think that's fueled by when I'm in high stress or high anxiety moments. It's like, the thing about it is, in high pressure or high stress situations are actually really good, are very effective. If I'm out in public and something of an emergency happens, I have no problem stepping in and supporting whatever in any way that needs to be. I don't get sort of caught in the headlights. But when I'm alone or on my own dealing with stress and anxiety, it can be a real struggle, and it can shut me down, and it can start to make me doubt the connections that I have with others, which, ironically, is also the most important thing to me. So maybe it's not ironic that that's actually the, the flip side to the coin. So yeah.
And then finally, what are the things that you need to have happen in a work setting on a regular basis to keep yourself sane or keep yourself from going into those stress reactions? I call them sort of, what are your upkeep needs?
Well, I think, I shared this earlier about how feeling connected with people is, like, I've known this for a long time, but it's so easy to just not have it be present and forget about it. It's not that you forget about it. It's just that it's just not you're not seeing it as a solution to what you're dealing with. But like, taking a moment to, connect with the team is so critical for me. And, I was telling my wife, who now works at the studio, that that's something I need to do. She's already planning stuff. So we're having like a team dinner, I think at our place, next month. So, I think that if I was to share advice in this capacity with anybody, it's like, you need to get other people to support you with these things. So like, you can't just know the solution and seek it yourself. You actually have to get others to remind you of it, but also to make sure that that's being driven, on a regular basis. So, I don't like rely on my team to be friends with me as much as I want to be friends with all of them. They have lives, and I don't put any pressure on them to do that. But from a business standpoint and a process standpoint, you can put that into your, weekly or monthly business plan, because you know what, I'm not unique in this experience, and certainly other people on the team feel the same way, where they benefit from that connection too. I'll give you just one really brief example. We have a studio, we all work together, but there's a few remote team members. But everyone works here 90% of the time. They're here. And even though we have all the systems in place for hybrid working, anybody can work remote at any time. It doesn't disrupt any work that we do. I've hired people who are like, and I told them about our model, you can work from home anytime you want. And they're like, oh, I'll probably be in the office 50% of the time or less. I really like working from home. And then they get hired and they're here 90% of the time. And I really think that's because they value the connection, and that needs to be something we foster. I talk to other studio leads, and they have the exact opposite experience, where nobody wants to be in the studio. And I just think that's a real shame because I don't know that I would survive that. So I try not to put pressure on people, but I think what we have done together is cultivate a environment where we all actually do understand the value of that. So
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing your background and your stories. If someone listened to this and was really inspired by something or wanted to follow up and ask you anything, what's the best way for folks to get a hold of you?
Well, certainly connect with me on LinkedIn, and I do try to actively, check my messages on there and be active. I don't post so much on LinkedIn, but I do communicate on there. And then the other thing is actually our Discord. So we have a very active Discord, and our whole team works on there. We have a really cool model where we sit in voice chat rooms so we can hop in and talk to each other. Even though we're all in the studio, some people are at home, or a couple team members work remotely, but then they can feel that real time connection with people. And then people who are on our Discord can actually see us all in there, hopping in and out and having meetings. And they can't come in. Well, some people can if they have the rights to certain channels, but we have over 4,000 people, but they can hop in and actually see us working on there. And I reply to 100% of questions that come up on Discord or DMs. Maybe one day that becomes too much for me to handle, but for now I really value it. And I think that the people who do engage with me really value it as well. So it's important that I just keep that up. So I think Discord's a really great way to connect with me and the studio and our community.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and really appreciate the time.
Yes, thank you. It was a pleasure. I really appreciate this. So thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to the entire episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it with your friends or anyone you think could benefit from it, and leave us a positive rating or subscribe. This episode was edited by Christopher Delano, music by Jake Hall, who's available for composer work in games. And if you're interested in learning more about the Game Founder support community, go to gamefounders.org or email me at carl@gamefounders.org. Thanks so much.